NFL playoffs are here, and Draftkings just released salaries for Saturday's two-game slate. We have $1 million up top, so a lot of action this weekend for NFL. $1 million on Saturday, $1 million on Sunday, and I'm not sure if they have a million maker on Monday or not for the showdown slate, but there's one game on Monday, so playoff football, always great to watch, always exciting to play for DFS as well, so going to do my best to break it down for you guys, but if you're new, my name is DK, and I cover content for Draftkings and for Prize Picks. If you guys are not familiar with Prize Picks, it is a player prop site. A lot of fun. You can, if you're a first-time user or haven't used the site yet, you can use the code DKDFS for 100% match up to $100. They do have some props up already. And how it works is you pick 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 6 player props. You can move up to 25 extra money. And they have a ton of different sports too, from basketball to football to college sports to PGA to tennis to esports. So give it a try. And again, make sure to use that code for 100% match up to $100. It's a free $100 to play with on the site. It's DKDFS, and I'll have it linked down below as well. Okay, so let's just get into it. Let's first take a look at the Vegas odds here for the two games. We got 43 over under, and the 49ers are currently 10-point favorites. Chargers and Jags is the late game, 47.5, with the Chargers being 1-point favorites. I think it opened up with the Chargers at 2.5-point favorites. It has got bet down to 1. So we'll go position by position, so there's only 4 teams to talk about. So we'll start off with the quarterback position. And I think the most popular quarterback play, and I think for good reason, is going to be Justin Herbert at 6.6. You know, he is, of these 4 quarterbacks, I think he's the guy with the highest ceiling. And I like the matchup for him as well. The Jags defense has struggled against the pass this year. We know the Chargers are a pass-first team as well. And, yeah, I mean, you got some clear guys you can pair him with. We'll see about the status of Mike Williams, which don't get me started about that. About the fact that in a meaningless game, the Chargers played their starters 3.5 quarters. That tilted me beyond belief because I played DeAndre Carter at low ownership. The Chargers only had 4 active wide receivers. And what I was expecting was maybe one drive from the starters and like the whole game for guys like Palmer and Carter. But no, you played 2 injury-prone wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams the entire game. And of course, Mike Williams got injured. Like, that's why you don't do it in a meaningless game. But again, I had to get that rant out there. Just cannot believe that happened. But back to Herbert, like I said, I think he's probably the most popular quarterback play. And I think he is my favorite quarterback play on the slate. Now, the other quarterbacks, Lawrence is at 5.7 on the opposite side. You know, he's kind of been up and down, but we've seen a couple big games from Trevor Lawrence over the last month or so. So I like his ceiling. I think, you know, he's a guy that, you know, can break the slate, and he does have some guys you can pair him with as well. The Jags run pretty condensed rotation there at wide receivers. So Lawrence a fine pivot off of what I think will be pretty popular Justin Herbert. And then a guy that I do like is a contrarian play, Geno Smith. What I think the field's going to do here is they're going to see the 49ers matchup and they're going to completely cross off the Seahawks, right? No one's going to target players against this 49ers defense, right? Well, I kind of like that as a leverage spot. And while I've talked about condensed target shares a couple times, with Seattle, especially true, right? When Geno Smith is throwing the ball, you know where it's going. It's Lockett or it's DK Metcalf. So I like Geno a lot as a contrarian play. I don't think he's going to be popular at all. So he's probably my favorite contrarian quarterback play. And then you got Brock Purdy at 5.5, more of a game manager, but has played well. Like he's played well. I expect the 49ers to be playing from ahead. So he's probably not going to have to throw the ball a ton, but he's not completely out of play. And yes, that's the quarterbacks for Saturday. Let's move on to running backs. Christian McCaffrey, 8.5, I think is a great play. Now, don't worry too much about last game. Right, last game, they were ahead pretty by a couple scores, and then they kind of shut down McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. They went to Jordan Mason a lot in the second half, but in a game where they actually have to win, I expect McCaffrey to get, you know, a good, healthy amount of touches on the ground and through the air. The worry I do have is you have Elijah Mitchell back, and we saw before Elijah Mitchell went down, it was almost a 50-50 split with him and CMC. Now, in the playoffs, will that be the case? Probably not. Like, I would think they would go more so that kind of 70-30 range for snaps with him and Elijah Mitchell. So I do like McCaffrey. And again, very involved in the passing game as well. He's going to be popular, but for good reason. And same thing with Austin Eckler. You know, these are two backs that are game flow independent. It doesn't matter if they're playing from ahead or they're playing from behind. they're going to be heavily involved. Eckler's basically like a wide receiver and a running back, so I like both the top and running backs a lot with CMC and Eckler. I don't think that's a contrarian take. Like, if I came on here and was like, oh yeah, guys, on a small slate, I actually really don't like McCaffrey. Like, if I said that, you should probably unsubscribe, right? So, McCaffrey, Eckler both look really, really good. Now, Travis Etienne at 6K, I'm just like, Don't get me started about Jerick McKinnon also scoring a touchdown and 4 touches last week. Just don't get me started on that. But Travis Etienne didn't get the workload I thought he would get. If you take a look at snaps last week, he played 27 of the 48 snaps. JaMycal Hasty played 23 snaps. That's not ideal. Now, I do think Etienne's a much more talented back, and I don't know if the snap share is going to go like that again. Like, I would think they'd want to give Etienne more opportunities, but yeah, last week it does make me a bit worried with Etienne. It doesn't make me off him. I just have a little bit, I'm a little bit reluctant to go there. I think he's more of a contrarian play if, in fact, they go to a pretty even split like they did last week. And then Kenneth Walker, another guy that I do kind of like here because he got, if you take a look at the snaps last week for Seattle, he played 61 of the 70 snaps. So he's going to be a guy that's going to be heavily, heavily involved. Now, sure, the matchup's not the best. My worry here with Ken Walker is if they do fall behind a couple scores early, do they phase him out of it? Right? I think that's possible. If that's the case, you could maybe take a shot on DJ Dallas. Just insane picture, by the way. But DJ Dallas is more of their pass catcher. So, you kind of saw against Kansas City, they lost 24-10. He had 6 catches on 6 targets. He could be playable in a large field tournament. If the game script goes right, if the 49ers get up by 2-3 scores early, I think they phase Walker out a bit and look to more of Dallas. But if you think the game stays somewhat competitive, then Kenneth Walker is going to be obviously the guy that you want to look to. So that's kind of my take on the Seattle running backs. I think Josh Kelly's too pricey for the Chargers. I'll pass there. Elijah Mitchell, I think, will be a relatively popular salary relief running back play. Again, I don't think it's going to be like a 50-50 split. I think it'll be more kind of that 70-30 split with him and McCaffrey. But he did vulture 2 touchdowns from CMC, which I was a bit tilted about because I played CMC last week at very low ownership. But so Elijah Mitchell is certainly in play. Again, if the 49ers are up early, I think they're going to ground and pound the ball. And Elijah Mitchell could see, 10-plus touches if the 49ers are playing from a big lead. Below that, I mentioned JaMycal Hasty. His snaps went up. Again, more of a large field tournament play, but he's not completely out of play. And that's probably it. I don't expect Mason to see any touches in this game. So no interest there. We mentioned DJ Dallas. That's it for running back. So let's move on to wide receiver. You got Keenan Allen at the top at 7K, and I think he should be the most expensive receiver. We'll see about the status of Mike Williams. Not sure if he's going to be able to go or not. But Keenan Allen, playing out of the slot, just has a super high floor, high ceiling. He's averaging 10 targets a game. For some reason, he played the majority of the game last week. That made 0 sense. But yeah, I think Keenan Allen's a great play. If you can afford him, he's probably the safest wide receiver play on the board. Now, I mentioned the Seattle wide receivers, right? I don't think they're going to be that popular. Metcalf had a down week last week. Tyler Lockett didn't do a ton either, but I like them as contrarian plays, right? Because I just think what the field's going to do is they're going to see that matchup against the 49ers. They're going to see their 10-point dogs, and they're just going to cross off the Seahawks. So I definitely am intrigued by DK and with Tyler Lockett because if Seattle keeps the game competitive and they're putting up and they're scoring points, these receivers are probably, at least one of them is probably going to have a really good game. Mike Williams is 6'1". We don't know if he's going to play or not. Again, he got banged up last week. He is a guy that has a ceiling, but a little bit of a lower floor than Keenan Allen. So if he plays, I like his upside in tournaments. Probably wouldn't play him in a cash game. If he misses, then Josh Palmer becomes the wide receiver 2 and would be a pretty good play in the mid-range. He had some good games when he was operating as a number 1, number 2 wide receiver earlier in the year. So would like Palmer, and then DeAndre Carter would be a playable value as well. Now, if Mike Williams is in, then Josh Palmer would be operating as wide receiver 3 and would be more of just a contrarian play, would feel a bit overpriced in that situation. All right, so let's talk about the Jags wide receivers. You got Christian Kirk at 5'9" and Zay Jones at 4'3". Now, Christian Kirk had a really big week last week, right? He had over 20 fantasy points. So I think he's going to be a pretty popular play. But don't forget about Zay Jones, right? Even though Zay Jones didn't do much last week, the opportunities were there. If you take a look at snaps for the Jags last week, Christian Kirk played 46 of the 48 snaps, and Zay Jones played 45 of the 48. So Zay Jones has also flashed a pretty big upside, right? 30 fancy points multiple times. So it will be interesting to see what the field does. I think a lot of people will go back to Christian Kirk, and I don't think he's a bad play. I think he's heavily involved. But if a lot of people look to Kirk, I might be one to go to Zay Jones at 4-3. And Zay Jones is also a lot cheaper, right? That's a $1,600 difference. So that's my thoughts on the Jags wide receivers. The 49ers wide receivers, Ayuk and Samuel, kind of just indifferent on both of them. If the 49ers are playing from a big lead, they're probably not going to pass the ball a ton. And I think I would slightly prefer Debo to Ayuk, assuming no limitations. I just think his ceiling's a little bit higher. But they're both decent options in the mid-range. I don't really have any strong takes. They're fine filler plays. I'm not really going to go start my lineup oh yeah, Saturday, guys, I got to play Brandon Ayuk. No, fine plays. They're fine. Again, I'm not going to prioritize, but they're definitely viable options. And then, we talked about Palmer, talked about Zay Jones. DeAndre Carter, if Mike Williams plays, probably can't get to him. He'll be operating as wide receiver 4. If Mike Williams misses, though, he'll be operating as wide receiver 3, and in my opinion, will be one of the better values in the board. So what I do with Carter strictly depends on what happens with Mike Williams. And Marvin Jones Jr., even though he's kind of dusty at this point in his career, I think it's still a decent value play. I mean, he saw over 50% of the snaps last week. He's their wide receiver 3, played 27 of the 48 snaps, ran a route in 22. He's been averaging 5-6 targets a game, and is close to min price. So if you're dumpster diving for value here, I think Marvin Jones Jr. is one of the better options. Below that, you have Juwan Jennings, who will be operating as a slot wide receiver, probably play about half the game. He'll average 2-3 targets a game. I think I prefer Marvin Jones at a similar price point. McLeod played 12 snaps last week. He's the wide receiver 4. I would just rather get to Jennings. I'm going to play one of those cheap 49ers wide receivers. And then a couple other things I wanted to mention here. Last week for the Seahawks, this is a complete dart throwing tournament, but you did see Cade Johnson operate as the wide receiver 3. He played 29 of the 70 snaps. Laquan Treadwell played 5. Young played 17. So if you're looking to one of those secondary Seattle wide receivers, if we base it off last game, I think I would rather take the shot on Cade Johnson. But again, more of just a large field tournament play with that. And Jamal Agnew, he's had a catch now, I think, in the last 4 games. He played 6 snaps, ran a route in 4. Again, he's had a catch every single game now in the last month, but probably not going to get a lot of opportunities. So I think that's everyone I think that is playable on this one. And finally, tight end. So George Kittle, 5.9K. Him and Ingram are the guys with the highest ceiling. Kittle is the most expensive tight end, and he's gotten a bit lucky with touchdown variance, I will say, over the last month. He's had 7 touchdowns over the last 4 games, so that's not going to continue, right? You can't expect George Kittle to continue to average 7 touchdowns, almost 2 touchdowns a game. Same thing I said about McKinnon, even though he scored again on 4 touches. So Kittle might be a bit overowned by the game log watchers. So while I think he's certainly in play and will play a majority of the game, I think he might be a bit overowned. Evan Ingram was a popular play last week. He was kind of disappointing. I took his under fantasy score on Prize Picks. That hit. Full swept the board on Saturday, by the way, which was nice. But Ingram's still going to run a lot of routes. If you take a look at last game, he played 42 of the 48 snaps. So at 4.2, I think he's a totally fine option. Gerald Everett's always kind of just there for me. He is their tight end 1 for the Chargers. He's going to play most likely in that 60% of the snap range. He's probably going to get around 5 targets. I'm totally fine with him. He's always just there. Now the Seahawks tight ends, I thought this was interesting. So no Will Dissly, he's out. But you did see Colby Parkinson play 55 snaps of the 70, and he ran around 22. Noah Fant played 45 snaps, ran around 25. So they basically ran the same amount of routes. I think the upside is still a bit higher on Noah Fant at 3-1, but Parkinson's the flat min price. And he's been averaging 5 targets a game over the last 3 games. So he is certainly playable as a punt option, Kobe Parkinson. And again, I think the ceiling's a bit higher in Noah Fant, but yeah, the two cheap Seattle tight ends are playable. Donald Parham is the tight end 2 for the Chargers. I still expect him to run a decent amount of routes. Last game, I don't put too much emphasis into it, but probably averages 2 targets a game. He's a playable large field tournament play. Below that, though, I don't think I'm going to mess with the 49ers backup tight ends. And yeah, I think that's kind of everyone. I don't think there's anyone else I wanted to mention. I mean, Chris Manhertz is the backup tight end for the Jags. He played 18 snaps, ran around 7. Yeah, and if like when you have got like if you're looking in this dart throw range, like I'm just gonna go to Parkinson, who played a majority of the game, right? If you're looking to a flat min price tight end, I'm just gonna go to this guy, right? So that's tight end. Quickly talking about defense. Again, we know defense is a super high variance position. I think the most popular defense on the slate will be the 49ers, which are fine. They're probably the safest defense in the board. I think, you know, the Chargers and Jags defenses are fine. If you wanted the contrarian defense, it would be the Seahawks. You know, they're pretty big underdogs, but they are only 2.4K. I hate that defense is still a thing. Like we had to pick a defense or draft. Don't get me. That's another story. That's another. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that right now. But so that's going to wrap it up for the video, guys. If you have been enjoying the content, just make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, if we get enough love, might do another live stream. Did a live stream last weekend for Saturday's games and mentioned Hunter Renfrow is my favorite value wide receiver. He came in a low ownership. He smashed. So hopefully you guys took advantage of that. And yeah, maybe if you want me to, I can do another stream for Saturday for this slate. But thanks again, guys. Enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next video.